We're currently in the middle of a 6-day lockdown here in South Australia, and obviously that brings with it plenty of challenges for people. So I thought it'd be a great time to talk about emergency funds, and in particular, how much do you need for an emergency fund? Hello everyone, I'm Ethan Rushock, and on today's episode I'm going to be answering the question, how much do you need for an emergency fund, and talking about the importance of emergency funds. So I live in South Australia and we're in the midst of a 6-day hard lockdown. So we're not allowed to leave the house for pretty much anything outside of essential grocery shopping and essential workers. It's a lot stricter than what we had back in April-ish. So our case numbers are actually really low at the moment, but they're trying to clamp down, get this lockdown done, and then hopefully by Christmas time we'll be back to normal. But this situation's brought up an interesting point for me that a lot of people have been out of work instantly because of this and can't access government support because it's a small lockdown. So in that situation, if you've got no emergency funds, then you're really going to struggle. So what I want to talk about is why that's really important to have emergency funds, how much emergency funds you really need, and how that can really help you navigate through the challenges that, say, 2020's brought us with COVID, or just any challenge that you might face going forward. So I'll just quickly touch on this whole situation we've got going on here in South Australia. But a week ago, no one here knew this was going to happen. We had had no community cases for over 6 months, I believe. And all of a sudden, within about a 48-hour period, we went from finding out we had a couple cases that escaped the hotel quarantine system to being put into a hard lockdown. So you can see how quickly a financial stress can be put on someone completely unexpected. So obviously COVID has brought that on, but you could lose a job just like that if a company folds, or you might have your house burned down and suddenly need funds to get you through those next couple of weeks before an insurance payment kicks in. So financial stress can come quickly, and when it comes quickly, you need to be prepared for it. So the first question is pretty simple. Do you need an emergency fund? And from what I've already said, you're going to work out my answer is yes, definitely. So I think emergency funds should be prioritized over almost anything else financially. So obviously you're going to need to pay your immediate bills, make sure you've got a roof over your head, food on the table, etc. But beyond that, the next thing should be building an emergency fund. So you want to be doing this before you start investing, or before you go buy a house or save for a holiday. Get some kind of emergency fund, lay it down in front of you so that you know you're covered for a small period of time, and it just takes away a lot of stress from your life. And having an emergency fund also gives you a bit of flexibility. Is, say you're in a job and it's really poor for your mental health and you don't enjoy it, you may have the flexibility to leave that job because you know you've got a little bit of backup funds while you're searching for a new job. Or say something comes up and you need to move out of town or interstate. If you've got some emergency funds, it just gives you that security that you know you can do it and not be stressed that you can't afford to take a day off of work. So the same goes if, say, you've got some kind of emergency come up and you're a casual and you don't have any leave to access. At least having emergency funds just allows you to get through these short-term emergencies. It's not there for long-term that you can sit back for 12 months and, I don't need to work. That's not what an emergency fund's about. It's about bridging that gap between an emergency happening and when you can get yourself back on your feet. All right, before I get into the next part of the video, I just want to again thank everyone for being here. If you're for your first time here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And also, if you like the videos, leave comments. It really helps me grow this channel. I really appreciate the support. Next question, how much do you need for an emergency fund? Now, this is going to differ between people, but something is better than nothing. So $100 an emergency fund is better than $0. But I don't think you should try and think of it too much in how much dollars do you need. So the Barefoot Investor, for example, he initially says, look, have $2,000 in an emergency fund. But it's really hard to put a dollar figure on it, purely because $2,000 to one person may be a month's worth of living expenses, and $2,000 to another person may be a week. So a dollar figure is really hard to compare. So the way I like to look at it is look at your total living expenses and try and work out how many weeks or months of that do you want to have as security. So I think a great way to start is try and have a month's worth of living expenses in your emergency fund. This covers you for one whole month that if you were to lose a job or unable to work, you know you've got a month's worth of funds there to get you through. And then once you've got that first month, you can try and build up to 2 months or 3 months, It's really up to you. I don't think you need to have 6 months in an emergency fund because I think there's probably better uses for money beyond, say, a 3-month period. But once you've got that first month, you can decide how much more you want to build up for that security. And so the other thing with this is that you've got to consider, say, you might injure yourself and be unable to work. A lot of insurance policies have a certain amount of time before they kick in. So you may want to look at your insurance policy and see how long before your income protection will kick in, for instance, and maybe you want to have enough funds to cover that gap period. It can be a bit confronting working out, how am I going to raise the funds to save for this? But a great way to do it is just to sell things around the house. So a lot of people have a lot of stuff lying around the house that they're not using. Go around, have a look. Do you have gym equipment you're not using around the house? Great value in that right now with COVID, especially with lockdowns around the world. Or have you got game consoles you don't use, or an old DVD collection? If you sell some of these things, you can quickly raise, it might only be a week's worth of living expenses, but it's still better than nothing. Now I want to get into some other tips. These are just odd bits and pieces around emergency funds. So a lot of people go, I don't need an emergency fund, I've got a credit card. Look, that may work for some people, but it's not really a reliable strategy. What happens if your credit limit goes and you lose that card, and then the next week your emergency comes up and you've got no access to funds? So I don't think you should be relying on credit cards for emergency funds. They might get you through, but they're going to cause other issues later down the track. So you're much better have that in the cash savings account rather than just relying on credit cards. Now you definitely can have your emergency fund in an offset account, but this might not work for everyone. You really need to be good with your money here and not chipping away at that emergency fund part of your offset account, because otherwise emergency comes along and you go, oh, I've already spent that on an investment, or I use that on a holiday and it's gone. So I think overall, if you've got it in an offset account, you may be saving yourself more interest than what you'd earn by having it in a savings account. So it could be a better strategy for some people, but you've got to be really good with your money to be able to do that. So the same goes for having it in, say, a redraw account on your loan. But as everyone always says, the risk with a redraw is if something happens and the bank cuts off that redraw and uses that as a down payment towards the loan, you may lose those funds. So it's just something you got to be considerate of. Make sure you're checking what the terms are on your redraw, etc., to how quick you can access those funds. Because obviously emergency funds, you want to be able to access them pretty much instantly. Because if you need funds right then and there, it's no good if you've got to wait a week for those funds to clear. And so the other thing is, don't touch the emergency fund for something that's not an emergency. First of all, it chews up your emergency fund. So I've heard it so many times where we go, oh yeah, I've got $2,000 in my emergency fund. I'm just going to spend $600 of it because this great opportunity's come up and I've found something I really want to buy that's on special, or I need some extra money for Christmas time. The problem with this, one, you've got to then replenish it. So you've got to work back to actually replenish it back to actually what you want to have as security. And two, it creates this negative mindset that, oh, I can just touch the emergency fund whenever I want. So it's all about mindset when it comes to money, and succeeding with it is that if you get into the habit of just constantly withdrawing on it, it suddenly becomes just a savings account. It's no longer there for emergencies because you're never going to know if it's going to be back to where you need it to be because you've just chipped away at it over the last month or two. So as you can see, having an emergency fund is really important. You can see that emergencies can come up from out of nowhere, especially in this current world we're living with the pandemic going on. But just think of other things. It could be your house burns down and you need the funds to get through before an insurance claim. You've got kids and something comes up for them that's really urgent. Or you've got a medical thing that isn't covered by your government. And then there's other things, like if you've got a pet that needs emergency surgery, or you lose your job, or you've got a car that has a motor that blows up and needs to be fixed urgently. There's lots of different things that could cause you needing emergency funds. And if you've got those emergency funds, it will take a lot of stress away from you in what may already be a stressful situation. All right, that's the video for today. Anyone else that's in South Australia, take care of yourself. Let's get through this lockdown together, and then we can come out on the other side and hopefully be in a healthy environment. And to everyone else around the world that's struggling in this pandemic, things are looking promising going forward with vaccines and just a better understanding of this. So I'm sure we will get through it. And like I've said, emergency funds can help people with their mentality during things like this, because they know that some of the financial stress of a situation like this is taken away. Today's question is a really basic one. It's just, do you have an emergency fund? I really want to get some feedback on, do people think this is important? Because I really do think it is an important thing to have. Thank you for watching the video, and I will see you soon.